Well, before we start talking about bearings, we just need to cover the two different types of bearings that are used in the bicycle industry. So let's try that intro and let's get right into these bearings and if ceramic bearings are worth the money extra that you pay for them. Now, the two type of bearings that they use in the bicycle industry are cartridge bearings and cup and cone. And a cartridge bearing is like what we call a seal bearing. You probably heard that term used for it. And it's pressed into position using an interface into the actual block that it's going to be held in. So this is typical with a bottom bracket. We have a cup and then the bearing is pressed in. So it's an interference fit so it stays in there. Now the other one is a cup and cone. Now they have a cone and then the bearings are loose in there. And then you use a cone that has a pre-tension that you put on the bearings that allows them to roll, but with minimal space, but doesn't lock the bearings up. And Shimano and Campagnolo typically use cup and cone bearings in their wheels. Now both of these designs can be ceramic bearings. Now what ceramic bearings are is one, which is the cheaper version, is just the balls are ceramic and the actual casing is steel. So that's the track that the bearings run on. Or the track and the bearing can both be ceramic. Now ceramic bearings, the advantage of the balls is they can make them more round and they're harder. So they roll better because there's less imperfections in them. Now if you have a ceramic ball with a steel face in the bearing, they work fine, but the problem is they're very susceptible to contamination. And if the contamination gets in there, what it does is it pits the steel very, very quickly because the ball is so hard, it just presses the stuff into the steel. And what actually happens is the ceramic bearing actually deteriorates very quickly compared to a just steel bearing. So even though you may get a better performance initially, if it's used in an environment where dirt and dust and so forth can get into the bearing, then they can actually lose their benefit very, very quickly. Now what they can do is they can also make the ceramic bearing with the balls that are ceramic and the face that's a ceramic. And that eliminates the problem with any foreign particles getting there and it pitting the steel because we have two surfaces now of the same hardness. But one of the negatives of using a ceramic ball and a ceramic face is they don't like any jarring or sharp bumps which we get when we ride a bike because they can chip because the hardness is so hard. And this is one of the disadvantages when you go to a ceramic ball and a ceramic face. So what if we use a steel bearing but a really good quality one? Well, what's been found is the performance compared to a ceramic bearing is pretty damn close. You may get some advantages with the ceramic bearings, but they have some disadvantages with their life cycle because even though initially they may perform better, they're subject to shock and they're also subject to foreign particles. So this is a big disadvantage after we've been riding or using this product through their life cycle and they deteriorate very, very quickly. So in conclusion, what we have is we have ceramic bearings that can give us some added performance, but that performance can deteriorate for a number of reasons very quickly and make the bearing actually less than a steel cartridge bearing or a steel cup and cone bearing. Whilst if you buy high quality steel bearings, they can give you a more consistent performance over the life of the bearing, which is almost as good as a ceramic bearing was when it was brand new. So I personally can't recommend the extra cost versus benefit. It just doesn't add up because, as we know, these ceramic bearings are significantly more expensive, especially when they're sold through the bicycle industry. And the other problem as well is ceramic bearings were specifically designed for high-speed applications, and in those applications they perform fantastic, but we're actually using them in a slow-speed application in cycling, which could be around in the hundreds of revolutions, not thousands, so the benefit is much smaller than in their design application. Well, okay, well, let's just now jump into Comments Corner. Okay, I've got my list here right in front of me. So the first one off the ranks is tubulars. Competition 25s, fitted by using 3M tape. No problems there. That was one comment. So he's basically saying, even though we had rim brakes and we have heating of the brake surface and the tyre can blow off the rim, what the pros are using and what other people are using is that this problem with the clincher carbon rim, if you use a tubular carbon rim, it removes a lot of those issues. Okay, the next comment was, new technology is not adopted by all manufacturers. So what we have is to end all be all, this new design comes out, but not all the manufacturers use it. And I think what this comment's trying to say is we get all of these different types of components and they're not compatible with other bikes, and then they discontinue them in the future. So we have all these bikes and bits and pieces that then aren't compatible. And let's be real about this, you know, this is not some super duper engineered device, it's a damn bicycle. Number 3 is guy mounted 2 carbon front wheels on descents. Yeah, this is a real thing. And I think it also depends on the rims you're using, because some manufacturers, I think, did reduce this heating of the brake track, but it was expensive to make, or the process was very, very difficult. Even though they did actually achieve it with the very late end carbon rims and the pads, the polymer type pads they were using, I think they had just about perfected the carbon rims and their braking surfaces. But then, of course, they had already started their research down the disc brake line and they wanted to bring those in. The bike industry takes 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Well, I don't know about that, but sometimes you may scratch your head like this and you may think so. Anyway, love that comment. And a lot of people commented about carbon rims not stopping in the wet. Now, I know this can be a real trick, and I did a whole video on this. And I know when you use some pads, it can be a bit of a trade-off between the dry conditions and the wet conditions. But I found if you experiment with different pads, there is pads that perform really well in the wet. And I used to use some Reynolds carbon wheels, which I believe they make a really good wheel. And these were an ultralight tubular rim. And I had their Cairo blue pads on. And that thing, I mean, I did some big descents in Thailand in really wet conditions, and they just stopped fine. I mean, okay, when it was dry, they worked a little bit better, but the difference wasn't like night and day like we do when we have some pads and some rims. So I think it depends on the manufacturer of the rims and the pads you're using. You can get pretty good performance in the wet, although it accelerates the wear of the rim and pad. Okay, guys, well, that's where I'm going to leave it, and I will catch you next vid. Cheers.